Hi, this is Emerald, and in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you a time that I overcame procrastination and self-sabotage, and I'm also going to be sharing with you how you can apply what I learned in this situation to your own situation so that you can also overcome self-sabotage, procrastination, and get yourself unstuck on your journey towards your big goals. Now, if you're on a long journey towards reaching some long-term goals, you'll know that there are different bottlenecks that come up on the path and that you might end up stuck, you might end up dealing with all kinds of situations where you're holding yourself back, getting in your own way. And so there can be all sorts of situations that come up with that. And basically this channel is all about being able to pinpoint what those underlying reasons are. But in this video, I'm going to be giving you like a personal anecdote and an example of how that works in practice, how you can actually work with your resistances as they come up by figuring out where they're coming from at the roots and being able to work with the resistance to bring you towards your long-range goal and to help you achieve consistent frictionless productivity in the direction of your goals. So this was a situation that came up about 5 years ago. And for some context, I have had a YouTube channel for the past 10 years called The Diamond Net. And in that, I was like creating videos, but I also became a coach about 3 years into that journey. And at a certain point in time, like things were like really flowing really well. Things were like really expanding. Things were really taking off. And I just felt so inspired. And I had this narrative going on in my mind that I'm like, oh, I'm going to share my insights with the world and I'm going to like save the world. I'm going to change major things. And so my dreams were really grandiose and really inspiring. And there was this sense of like, oh, I'm going to be this superhero that comes in and like saves the day and has this massive impact on the world. And what would happen is I would spend a lot of time dreaming about this and being really excited. But then when it actually came time to do the work, I found myself resisting it a lot and sometimes just wanting to like almost like go into the closet, hide, and then just not come out for a year. I just was really trying to hide all of the time, or like I would just go underneath the blankets and I just like wouldn't want to face with the world. And so I ended up in this really polar situation where when I would think about my goals and dreams, I would feel so inspired and so aligned with them. But when it came time to actually do the work, oh, it was like nails on a chalkboard. But prior to that, I was really in a sense of flow with my dreams and my goals. And it was like, oh yes, this is awesome. I'm getting to the next step. I'm expanding. And then around that time, I ended up having this really interesting dream. And in the dream, I was on horseback and like the horse was going really, really fast. And we were like on this like huge journey and we were making great time. Like the horse was just like sailing and it was such a flow. And then we got halfway through the journey and it was exactly halfway through the journey. Someplace in the middle of nowhere. And the horse suddenly stopped, laid down and turned into a girl. And this girl had this like blank expression on her face. And like she just kind of sat there and she didn't do anything. And I felt so angry in the dream. I'm like, oh my God, now I can't move forward toward my goal. It's like we can't get to the end of the journey. We were making great time, but now everything has come to a screeching halt. And it's like, I don't even have a horse anymore. I need the horse to get to the end of the journey. And now the horse is a girl and this girl isn't being cooperative in any kind of way. There's just like a flat expression on her face. And what was interesting about that dream, as dreams often are, it was a perfect metaphor for what I was going through in life. Like I said, everything was going great. Everything was flowing smoothly until that point. But then I just ran into a sudden stop. And I was having to fight myself even to get myself to do the most basic things. And like I mentioned before, the way that I would resist things was really interesting. It was like I was a little child hiding in a blanket fort. And I just didn't want to ever do a single thing for work ever again. So I was dreaming of being able to be so productive and so effective in my work. But then this other part of me is like, no, I never want to work again. I just want to hide. And at first I didn't trust this impulse to hide at all. I was just like, oh my gosh, why am I being lazy? Why am I standing in my own way? I know what I need to do. Why can't I just do it? And I spent months and months just fighting with myself to try to get myself to do the productive work to make things happen. And one of the things that I should mention here is that I already had 8 years of experience with inner work. I knew theoretically that, okay, there must be some good reason why I'm self-sabotaging that way. But because it felt like such a high stakes thing and I had this thought of like, if I don't do it, then nobody's going to do it. It was like I started to just go to war with that part of myself and just started to get into this big power struggle with part of me that was trying to hold me back. But then I eventually wised up and I was able to use my skills with shadow work and with inner work to be able to really figure figure out why this part of me was sabotaging me. And so this part of me that just wanted to hide away and that never wanted to be responsible for another thing ever again was like a small child. Like I would put this part of myself at like age 4, maybe 5 years old. And this part of me just never really fully got to be a child. And so what happened when I was a very, very small child is that I started to tune into my parents' vulnerabilities, my sister's vulnerabilities. And it wasn't like I was parentified and it wasn't like I was treated like a therapist. I just intuitively picked up on certain foundational weaknesses in my family. And I started to feel really responsible to prevent them from suffering. And so I remember as a kid, I would be kept up late at night because my dad, he's a mechanic. And I knew that at a certain point in time, because that's a really physical job, that he's not going to be able to do that job forever. And I was like, well, how is my dad going to make money? And how is he going to survive when he gets to, an older age? And then my older sister, she's developmentally disabled. And so I started to realize at age 7 that, once my parents pass away, I'm going to be the one that takes care of her. And then there were also some subtle vulnerabilities I picked up on with my mom. And then it was also vulnerabilities within like the broader family structure as well. And so what ended up happening is that I developed this tendency to be from a very low state of power to try to take on tons of responsibility for the family. And this presented itself as a constant focus towards their vulnerabilities and a sense of being the hero that has to protect them from their vulnerabilities. And it was mostly an inner turmoil. It wasn't something that I did. It was just something that I thought about and something that I worried about. And so from there, that same pattern, that same coping mechanism of constantly worrying about my family's vulnerabilities, because I was picking up on some fundamental weaknesses and vulnerabilities there in the family structure and with them individually, what ended up happening is that as I became more aware of the world, I started to do the same thing with the whole entire world, just picking up on all of the little vulnerabilities underneath the surface of everyone on the planet that I'm aware of. And then feeling like I am single-handedly responsible for fixing or solving all of those problems, when I'm just repeating the same pattern of being this tiny person with hardly any power, trying to solve all of the problems of the world in the same way that I was a teeny tiny person with very little power, trying to solve all of the problems in my family. And again, it presented itself not in a doing, but in a worrying, in a ruminating. And so what was happening with my goals, my very grandiose goals of, I'm going to share my insights and I'm going to change the world with them, that was actually just another version of my ruminating about being responsible for something far beyond the scope of my control as a teeny tiny individual person. And what was happening is that part of me had this sense of excitement of I can do it. I have the power to do it. And then there was this other little vulnerable, powerless child part of me that's this is too much. I don't want that much responsibility. And so without my realizing it, what I was doing is I was sort of cross-mingling my goals with certain trauma patterns of pain from childhood. And there was part of me that did not want to repeat those same patterns again. And so what it was doing is it was putting on the brakes. It was in the dream. It was the horse girl who just laid down and then had the blank expression on her face. And it was this part of me that was saying, no, I'm not going to take responsibility for things beyond the scope of my control. And I am going to sabotage your goals if you keep trying to make me do that. And so when I finally started listening to the part of me that was the small child in the blanket fort, and instead of seeing it as an enemy, I could see it as an ally, and I started listening, what ended up happening is I ended up making some tweaks. And so the first thing that I changed is I changed the scope of my goal. So instead of feeling I want to save the whole entire world, I want to be this hero that swoops in and I'm going to give you the insights, and those insights will unwire all of the problems that humanity is dealing with. So instead of thinking about things in that really grandiose way, I thought about it more as okay, I think that my insights are valuable and I can help a narrow range of people. Most people aren't going to benefit from what it is that I offer. It's a small, narrower percentage of people. Then I also had to switch my mindset from thinking about this as an obligation. So like I'm this hero that's obligated to come in and save things. And instead to really recognize that it's 100% based in my own sovereignty. It's like, I'm not supposed to do this. I am choosing to do this, and I want to do this. And so I stopped approaching my goals from a place of obligation and instead started approaching them from a place of desire. And then in one of my medicine journeys, I even had this experience where basically it was like the divine intelligence was showing me like my relationship to my goals, and it had likened it to like, let's say that there's a small child that's really eager to help the parents set the table for dinner, right? And it's like, oh yay, I get to set down the spoons. But it's like the child isn't responsible for making sure that the dinner happens, but the child can participate and it's exciting. And so for me, when I share my insights, I am not setting the table. I'm not responsible for the whole dinner. It is a collaborative project, and I'm just setting the spoons down on the table. And then it was also removing myself from the center of importance and seeing myself as a side character in a greater story, where it's like it's not just me that's helping to save the world, other people are too, and lots of people are on this path of helping the world progress to a better place. And so I can join that or I can sit it out, because the whole thing isn't dependent upon me. And once I ended up really understanding what that part of me that was sabotaging me was trying to tell me, and I made the changes to accommodate for that part of me that really needed to feel cared for, needed to feel listened to, needed to feel like there were limits to the level of responsibility that I was taking on with my goals. Once that happened, the self-sabotage went away and I was able to more easily just be consistent with my productivity. So what I had to do in this case was I needed to change my goals and the way that I thought about them, and I also needed to really become aware of and, let's say honor my own boundaries around the limitations of my own power and my level of responsibility. And so the reason why I tell you this story about myself is so that you can use it if you're dealing with self-sabotage, or if you're dealing with procrastination, or you're holding yourself back in some way. And so the main message that I would have here to send to you is that if you are running into procrastination, self-sabotage, any of that, there's a wisdom in it. And you just have to ask yourself deeper questions to understand the true wisdom of your self-sabotage. And that's because there's no such thing as self-sabotage. It's always just another part of you that is trying to operate in your own best interest, but in a way that happens to go against your conscious goals. And in this particular instance, I was trying to motivate myself in the same direction as certain trauma patterns, which would have just repeated those trauma patterns on a bigger scale. And so that part of me was really trying to protect me and hold me back from experiencing the negative things that I experienced before. And so with this, what it is that you want to do, if you notice yourself procrastinating, self-sabotaging, standing in your own way, you want to ask yourself, how am I trying to protect or serve myself by holding myself back? And instead of trying to fight with yourself and railroad over the part of you that is trying to set that boundary or trying to hold you back, instead really listen to it and say, okay, there must be a good reason here. There must be a good self-interested reason why I'm holding myself back, even if it's totally backfiring. And so when you can start to think that way, that is when things will start running a lot more smoothly on your path. And this is especially important because the path has all sorts of different bottlenecks that you can run into. So with this isn't the only time I've ever dealt with self-sabotage. And I know self-sabotage will come up in the future as well. But whenever I meet with self-sabotage now, I now have all of this experience of what it is to actually work with those sources of the self-sabotage so that I can make the changes and to be able to honor the wisdom that's being given to me through the self-sabotage. So if you're someone who's on a big long-range journey towards major goals and you're dealing with feeling stuck and you're dealing with procrastination and self-sabotage and all sorts of other things, and you don't know how to get unstuck, and you want to work with somebody who's been on this journey before and that knows how to get you unstuck, then I highly recommend putting in an application to work with me. The link is down below in the description box. Now, another reason why we might hold ourselves back on the journey towards achieving our goals is because we have limiting beliefs. And so if you want to learn how to let go of limiting beliefs, I recommend you go ahead and check out this video right here.